Welcome to Certain Point of View, your first step into a much nerdier world. Be sure to subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Just go to certainpov.com. And now, your hosts, Ben Milton and Addie Thomas.
Hey, Nerf Herders, I'm Addie Thomas.
And I'm Ben Milton.
Thanks for joining us. Today, we are going to be talking about Star Wars Rebels. We've got one half of the season that's gone so far, but before we get to that, Ben, can you tell us about what's going on with Patreon?
Yes, Addie, I can. That was such a great transition. I loved it. Here's what's going on with Patreon. We have set up a page as a way for you to help support the podcast if you're so inclined in a financial manner. Telling your friends is still the number one way that you can support the show, and getting the word out about the show so that people find out about us is the absolute number one way. But if you would like to help us financially, there is a Patreon account. There is a link on our website at certainpov.com under the support section for Patreon. A little video there will do a much better job than I can possibly do explaining how Patreon works. But essentially, it's a way for you to donate to the show financially and support us that way. Other than that, there's other ways that you can support us. You can just give us donations, and we're going to have a whole bunch of other stuff coming up with t-shirts and mugs and stuff like that for you to buy certain POV gear. So that's pretty much it. It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward, and if you'd like to help us out, great. If not, we're going to continue to do the show for free. We're never going to put the show behind a paywall. This is always going to be the number one way that we continue to work with people and tell interesting thoughts about what we think about shows and stuff like that. But we are going to give our patrons additional content and additional stuff for them to see and listen to. So there are some benefits to it that you can find on our Patreon account. Again, all the links and everything is on our webpage at certainpov.com.
And don't worry, if you don't even want to be part of our, Patreon team, it's all good. We still want to hear from you, take part in the discussion, debate about whatever we feel about shows. Call us crazy, call us brilliant, whatever you feel like. You can join those conversations on all of our social media sites. You can also share the podcast with fellow nerds. Again, that website is certainpov.com. Again, today we are talking Star Wars Rebels. We have been huge fans of Rebels. I am a diehard fan of Dave Filoni and what he's been doing with his corner of the Star Wars universe. And it was cool just, recently coming out of Star Wars Rogue One. We got a lot of fun Easter eggs for Rebels. We heard a reference to Hera Syndulla over an intercom. We saw Chopper in the background of a shot. We even saw the Ghost itself in the background of a number of shots. In the big battle and at Yavin Base. And we also know going into this back half of the season that we're going to have Saw Gerrera actually show up in Star Wars Rebels as well. Potentially we might see Jyn Erso as well. Who knows what other Rebels characters we'll see. But let's back up a little bit. This is the third season of Star Wars Rebels. We've had the first half of this season go by, and it got off to an incredibly strong start. Ben, so what are some of your thoughts, especially with the start of the season, with this season?
Well, the nice thing was they brought in, a fantastic character. They brought in Grand Admiral Thrawn, which, from the expanded universe and the novels and stuff like that, was a very popular character, very interesting character, very strong character, very formidable character. So it was great to have that presence pushed into the season to foil the Rebels, especially since you had Vader last season, and, you're kind of taking that away. So what are you replacing him with? Like, how do you replace Vader, right? Right.
You kind of have to go different rather than try to go like more epic.
Yeah.
And I think that's a great way. Like, Thrawn is just a very different, very cerebral villain.
Right.
And I think that lends a very different threat that the Rebels haven't faced yet.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that one of the things that made this season strong was Thrawn, is that it was sort of a different direction for the show. It went like last season with not the Night Sisters, the Sith Inquisitors, well, the first 2 seasons really is with the Sith Inquisitors. It was a very interesting idea of like, you know, Jedi versus Sith idea, and not really the Empire wasn't quite as pronounced. But now the Empire's had a little bit of time to form and establish itself even more, it was nice to have Thrawn there, because it really does make the Empire feel like the enemy and not the Sith.
Which is incredibly important, because by the time you get to A New Hope, there's certain, you know, with both Clone Wars and with Rebels, you know, these are all prequel type shows, really. And I think the interesting thing is there's certain expectations of what the landscape of the Star Wars universe has to look like. You know, yes, there are a lot of questions as to how many Jedi survive, but the problem is if you have too many Jedi surviving, too many Force users surviving, too many Force users specifically with lightsabers surviving, it honestly kind of neuters the landscape that we enter into the Star Wars universe in A New Hope. Because it's very it's very important to make sure that, you know, you have Ben Kenobi, Yoda, and Vader and Palpatine really as the only serious players on the as far as Jedi and Sith are concerned. You know.
Right. Yeah. I completely agree, and that's why. But it was still also refreshing though to see the Bendu, because as a Force user, but not caught up in the Sith Jedi struggle. They're just, you know, he's outside of that, but still a Force user, which I thought was really cool. And I really, really liked the moments that we've had with the Bendu and what he's doing with the holocron and how he's kind of helping in sort of a detached way. It's a different look at the Force than we've ever seen before. Honestly, kind of more on the lines of what I was really hoping out of the two characters in the movie. Why can't I think of in Rogue One? Yeah, where it ended up they were still pretty tied closely to the Jedi and guarding the Jedi Temple.
Well, it wasn't really a Jedi temple; it was a Force temple, but it was, yes, the remnants of the Jedi Order, but it wasn't specifically a Jedi temple.
Wasn't it? I thought it was.
It was the Guardian of the Wills.
Yeah, they were the Guardian of the Wills, but I thought that was they were Guardians of the Kyber crystals, and that was a Jedi temple. Which, because I thought there was a line in the movie where they said like that's the last of like whatever that there'll be any kind of signs, of the Jedi Order.
There's a lot that's so, and I don't know how much, and this is one of the things that I guess because that movie is so dense that we don't necessarily get to pick up on all of this, or how much of this is pre-promotional publicity, but the Jedha is more of a like the people of Jedha are common people who were worshippers of the Force. So there are a lot of non-Force users, but there's also it's sort of the mecca for Force users, not just.
Yeah, but there was a Jedi temple there.
Right, there's a Jedi temple, but I think from the description that I kind of got from a lot of what Gareth Edwards was talking about, the nature of Jedha is sort of like it's the Dome of the Rock. It's important to multiple Force religions. It's not just a sacred site for the Jedi. It is sacred to the Jedi, but to multiple Force faiths. It's not something that. Yeah.
So the Guardians of the Wills that's a completely separate religion?
Yes.
Oh, they did a shit job establishing that.
Well, I don't know if this was the movie to do that in, or if that is, so you have obviously Star Wars Story Group and other media for them to do that in. So I have a feeling that's something that we'll see in other media, and that wasn't something that they necessarily wanted to run with in that movie. That's the impression I got.
Okay. Yeah, all right. Anyway, at least we got it with the Bendu. I think they've done a much better job with the Bendu than they did in the movie then. because it is clearly a completely separate thing.
Right.
Still in touch with the Force, but still very not at all involved with Jedi and Sith and the struggles of the galaxy in that regard, and almost feels very detached from the galaxy. I'm curious to see if there is an opposite player of the Bendu, though, because the Bendu does feel kind of Jedi in some ways, of like the. So. I do, in the way of like how you imagine the Jedi should be, like the idealized of what the Jedi should be, of like the detached forces of good, very mystical, very philosophical in their way, and not really like the warrior priest that we've been given.
I guess that's maybe what. Do you think that's maybe what you and I have made the Jedi out to be? Because I definitely feel a difference between him and the Jedi, because the Jedi are committed to, a particular side of the Force and not to balance of the Force. Yeah,
that's what I said. I think he's the idealized of what the Jedi should be.
Right,
but I imagine the Jedi should be.
Yeah, I'm interested, because the other thing is, when Maul shows up, obviously much later in the much later in the season, the Bendu isn't like worried about Maul. He is like, I don't necessarily see the Bendu as good. I still feel that the Bendu more is good or bad, if that makes sense.
I mean, he is concerned. He has concerns about bringing the holocron together and using, what that will ignite.
Right.
I mean, I don't.
But he's not concerned in the ongoings of the galaxy or the politics of it, or the or necessarily the cosmic struggle between.
He's detached from it, but I don't think that means that he's not good. He's detached. He's not concerned about the kind of, like you said, the politics of it. But right. I don't think I wouldn't call him just pure neutral either.
Right. Well, I guess I still feel a distinct separation between him and the Jedi.
Yeah, absolutely.
Oh, okay.
Absolutely.
Okay.
I'm not saying that, but I'm saying like he has like it's sort of the idealized version of what, like when the Jedi are described of what they ideally should be, and obviously in the prequels we find out that they're very much not what they're supposed to be ideally. They're involved in politics. They're supposed to be guardians, but they're acting as generals and military people, right?
Right.
Like ideally, they should be the Bendu.
Let me ask you this. So that's an interesting point, because I get, and maybe because when obviously you had, when you watched Star Wars, obviously you experienced them as they came out. So you have a lot more time with the original trilogy, whereas when I watched it, I made sure to watch it in order of its release. I still like the original trilogy better, but I did watch, A New Hope, Empire, Return of the Jedi, and then A Phantom Menace, and then I went to see later on that year, I saw Attack of the Clones in theaters. And for me, I always kind of interpreted the Jedi still not necessarily as the like that discipline is like so well here this is a tough thing to like really draw a line on, but I still didn't see them as necessarily that idealized version that I think you're talking about, because I see the Jedi as still wrong at the end of Return of the Jedi, that Luke chooses his own path in my own mind. He has no other way to say that he's a Jedi than his father was before him. But I always kind of viewed that Ben Kenobi and Yoda still wanted Luke to kill Vader, that there was nothing to redeem in Vader, but that Luke still found some place in the middle between what the Jedi wanted and what the Sith, what the Emperor and Vader wanted, and found and brought balance that way. Mm-hmm. So maybe so.
So what you're saying is that he rejected both the Jedi and the Sith and created something new.
Right.
That's an interesting interpretation for sure, and it could very well be. I look at it, when I see it, I look at it as he reestablished the Jedi to what
Right.
they should be.
Because it is called Return of the Jedi.
Yeah, exactly. Return of the Jedi, where they've been off the path, like from the beginning. They've been off, and they veer way far off the path. And even Yoda and Obi-Wan, who are like the guiding icons of the Jedi religion, are so far are off the path. And it takes Luke making that choice and bringing balance to the Force, because Obi-Wan and Yoda couldn't bring balance to the Force because they were so extreme in their views and had so misinterpreted and gotten caught up in the politics and the times of which they lived, that they were unable to kind of see the forest through the trees.
Yeah, I can see that. Yeah, that's an interesting. It's interesting that we have such a very subtle line. With
Yeah, it is subtle.
Luke's role in Return of the Jedi. I think I do think your interpretation is the right one. My thought is, I wonder if, because you have like Gary Kurtz, who left production of the Star Wars series after Empire, and then there were the plans for far more Star Wars movies.
Yeah, there's going to be another 3. Yeah.
Right, and a much more bittersweet ending to Return of the Jedi, and a much more ambiguous ending, and also plans for Leia not to be Luke's sister and stuff like that. All those other plans, and like Boba Fett to be a legit threat, and all that,
right.
like all these other things like that were supposed to originally be part of this story. Like I wonder if that was where the story was supposed to head, especially with the imagery of Luke wearing black and the green saber and all of these a lot more hints at ambiguity, but that obviously didn't really go anywhere because the trilogy ended then in '83.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think that Lucas has ever definitively said where he originally intended it to go. It could have been a much different story. It could have had a much different ending, a much more, like you said, sort of ambiguous ending or bittersweet ending. I think I would have preferred it to be that way. But with the movies that we got, it is what we got. Now, I think that we may get some of that ambiguity and some of that, confusion now with where they're taking the movies. Now with Luke.
Right.
And what they've done with Kylo Ren and with Rey, I think that maybe we may get some of that put back into the Star Wars mythology.
That's an interesting thing, because I've been seeing a lot of debates online, and we'll get back to Rebels in a little bit, but I do kind of want to follow this trail here for a little bit, because there's been a lot of I've heard a lot of people criticizing Force Awakens for being the remix of A New Hope and Empire, and then you also have some people criticizing Rogue One in different ways for being a different type of prequel. But coming back to Force Awakens, I wonder if the character of Rey is sort of a replacement for who the other was supposed to be that Yoda speaks of. I know we interpret it now, like because of how the series ended in '83. Obviously Leia is referred to. It doesn't really go anywhere because that's where the trilogy ended. But I wonder if yes, I know they've diverted to some extent from Lucas's vision, but I know that J.J. Abrams spent time with Lucas. Still kind of got an idea of what he wanted to do, and it'd be interesting if Rey is sort of a little bit more of what the other the other that Yoda spoke of is supposed to be, and Kylo Ren might even be an analog for what Luke. A path that Luke may have gone down.
Yeah, and kind of retelling that story again.
Or trying to continue it the best way they can.
Right. To reboot it and restart that story in a new way. I think so, and I hope so. I mean, you and I have talked many times about sort of like our fanboy fantasy of like Luke being the gray Jedi and kind of losing his path. And, stories have been real, novels have been written about that, about Luke becoming a dark Jedi and stuff like that. I think that's really fascinating, from a mythology standpoint. And I know, here we go with Joseph Campbell, but, like from that hero's journey perspective, like there's also the hero's fall. Like that's another popular archetype throughout mythology of the hero falling and then being redeemed himself. And since they did such a piss poor job with Anakin, hopefully they can do a really good job with Luke Skywalker and really make that story compelling, because now we've seen his rise in a really compelling fashion. We see a really bitter sort of failure on his part, even if it doesn't lead to a Darth Vader-esque fall where he's, roaming around the galaxy and just killing people willy-nilly, but sort of even just lost his way and lost his faith and sort of gets corrupted by the disappointment of his failure. I think that makes a really fascinating story. And to bring it back to Rebels, like you're kind of seeing that with Kanan and Ezra, like
right.
Kanan's blindness and how he's dealing with that and struggling has actually made him stronger in the Force and more reliant upon the Force and more open. And that's really what's keeping Ezra in check, because Ezra is like this little ball of anger now, and he's teenager and he's rebellious and he's in a rebellion and he's doing all these violent things and killing people willy-nilly,
and he's very attached.
And he's super attached. So like there is like this great struggle now between Kanan and Ezra, and of just trying to keep him in check. And Maul coming in at the end of the season to further strain that relationship, and the trust between Ezra and Kanan is fantastic. So I think like they're playing out a lot of these ideas in Rebels kind of in the same way that they're playing them out in the movies. But like what's great about the TV shows is you have so much more time to tell the story. You can let things breathe, and it's not so dense that if you miss one line of dialogue, you completely miss the point of what's happening for that story. And that's what's really, really great about Rebels this season is them playing with some of those ideas between the Bendu, between Maul, between Ezra, and between Kanan. Those four characters this season have really, really had a lot of great moments.
Absolutely. So we've had some of the the Jedi and the Sith cosmic struggle, and the nature of the Force. We've also had, going to Thrawn, the nature of the Empire and the nature of the Rebellion. That's also been a very big factor. Actually, I think in many ways a much bigger factor in this season. How have you felt about some of that? We had episodes with Wedge. We had some backstory on Hera. We had some backstory on Sabine and Mandalorian stuff.
I liked most of it, honestly. I really liked most of it. I especially liked it when Thrawn was involved. Anytime Thrawn is in an episode, it's good. Like, there's a legitimate, serious threat. Even when the rebels are thinking they're winning, like you realize that Thrawn is just data for Thrawn that eventually down the road he's just going to give them this crushing defeat and really just squeeze the life out of them, and that he's just letting them get away as a way to learn more about them. And it's fascinating, and it's like you fear for them. Like, I'm not one of those people who get up all caught up in their shows and like, oh, I don't want Hera to die, and I'm like, oh, Hera's gonna freaking she's gonna get Thrawn's gonna get her eventually. Like, yeah, it's fascinating to see the cat and mouse game that he's playing with them. And I thought some of the episodes were really, really good. I thought some of the episodes were a little bit weaker than others. Obviously, I mean, that's just gonna happen in a season as big as this. Yeah. And it is still a kid's show.
I think we both can call it out right now. Iron Squadron was definitely
just
one of the
hot garbage. But to me, it reminded me very much of the episodes in what was the other cartoon? Clone Wars. I'm having a real the droid episodes, exactly. Like very kid oriented, kind of like, and here is your this is a kid's show still. Like, remember, this is on Disney XD, so we're throwing the kids a bone, and then we'll get back to you adults in a little bit. Which is fine. It is what it is. But it was kind of a throwaway episode. It really didn't add much to lore or to story, other than to introduce these little kids. So, but I think overall, they've done a really good job of establishing the Empire as sort of this really oppressive force, and gotten back back to like the imagery of the World War II imagery of like Nazi Germany and just like, boots on the ground and just searchlights going around and, everybody's living in fear of this gigantic, enormous, these big, huge Star Destroyers flying above their planets and their cities and, troops marching through cities. I mean, they've done a great job of creating that imagery and creating the fear that the Empire really should be. And then we kind of lost, and I wouldn't say we lost it, but it was, I never really felt that fear before, except for in, the original trilogy.
Right. I think Empire Strikes Back is where you really feel that, to be honest, just because the Empire is winning there and you do see them beating our heroes at just about every turn. Yeah, but I think you're right. Like it was refreshing because stormtroopers have become such a joke, and in some ways they kind of still are. But it is nice seeing that they're a legitimate threat. That the Empire's a legitimate threat. I'm enjoying seeing the way that they're building the Rebel Alliance. This was definitely a big thread of last season as well, and I like that they're continuing on that path. But you're seeing. We're getting a chance to see it closer to our characters, not just a story. It's not just a story about Ezra and Kanan. And while they are definitely the bigger story, I like seeing the nature of this is the nature of Mandalorian culture, or this is the nature of the Mandalorian occupation and how they have to work with the Empire. I like getting a chance to see the inner workings of that and seeing the inner workings of the rebellion and of the Empire. I think it was, one of the best episodes of last season was I believe the episode was the Honorable Ones. It was the episode with Zeb and with Agent Kallus, and getting to see that story have a payoff, because at the end of that episode you see Zeb being rescued, like the two of them helping each other, but when Zeb is rescued, there's definitely a family environment, and when Kallus is rescued, there's no one to really welcome him. And now we've seen that he's now a rebel spy, and of course he's definitely it looks like he's gonna come into Thrawn's crosshairs pretty soon on this series. But it's cool seeing that transition. It's cool seeing the rebellion continue to gain ground little by little. It's definitely I think it adds to the desperation of who the Rebel Alliance is. Because, we've seen so many victories for the Rebel Alliance. That's why the Death Stars have become such jokes now. Starkiller Base is such a joke because it's like, oh, well, whatever the Empire builds, the rebels are, of course, they're going to beat it. But here we get a chance to actually kind of explore that is such, an underdog against the odds type of moment for the Rebel Alliance. That isn't the norm for the Rebel Alliance by any means.
Right.
And I think that's such an important. I think that's an important role that Rebels is serving as a show for the Rebel Alliance. So I'm definitely enjoying that a lot.
Yeah, I think they've done a great job of that, and really, because we get in the beginning of A New Hope, it's like this was their first victory, just off the floor of their first victory in a while. It makes it feel like when you come into A New Hope, and especially now under the context of seeing the new movie, you recognize that, oh wow, these guys haven't really been doing great. This rebellion is not going particularly well leading up to A New Hope. So it is nice to see them take their lumps along the way, even as they are having some victories, and they have to have enough victories to put together a half decent rebellion, but they also need to be getting their asses handed to them along the way, because the Empire really needs to be, and should be, and rightfully so, it runs the galaxy. It has unlimited resources. It can do whatever it wants to do.
Exactly, which I thought was a great trade-off in the season opener when they have the heist of all the Y-Wings, all the Y-Wing bombers, and these are Y-Wings that are being disassembled by the Empire. So the Y-Wings that they're able to get and to use for the Rebel Alliance all are missing hyperdrive, so they have limitations. They've got something, but it's only a little bit of ground that they've gained.
Yeah,
so it's interesting to see the trade-off. Yeah, exactly.
I completely agree. And that's been great. So they've done a really good job of establishing that. The show is so well run and so well thought out. Like, I love it. I'm loving it. Wasn't sure, like, when they first described this show, whether or not this was going to live up to Clone Wars, because I loved Clone Wars so much. But, they've done a great job with this crew, and the Ghost and the crew of the Ghost, they're all fantastic characters. I'm curious to see where they go, how they end it. Like, we are getting fairly close. Like, there's only another season or two left of this before you're caught up, right?
Right. Well, so that's an interesting thing. So there are a couple things you can still do here. So now Dave Filoni did get a promotion to supervise pretty much all like Lucasfilm animation, or I guess for the TV shows. And there's rumors that he's developing another TV show. So
Okay.
it'll be interesting to see. Obviously they're starting it now. There's been hinted at the idea that yes, Rebels does have a defined endpoint, but they've also kind of talked about like we may see the battle at Scarif, above Scarif, from the Rebels crew's viewpoint as well. And now with the addition of characters from Rogue One, we do have some room for a lot of other story to be told. We know, by the time we get to Rogue One, that Saw Gerrera's group of rebels is no longer part of the Rebel Alliance.
But
So,
again, like, that's still only like a year or two away. Like,
right.
I guess you could theoretically run this show all the way through Jedi.
Yeah,
Because there's still
exactly.
there's still a rebellion going on all the way up until the Emperor's dead. And even then, I guess you really could continue the show as long as you really wanted to, as long as it was getting the ratings and Disney was happy with it.
But you also, I mean, you also can't expect Ezra and Kanan to really be running around
Right.
by the time you get to Empire either.
Right. Yeah.
So
Like, especially Kanan. Kanan's got to kind of die soon, right?
yeah, or go
Like, by the time that Luke Skywalker comes on the scene legitimately, like, he's kind of got to be out of
because
the
he can't be
picture.
like, oh, you have a lightsaber, I have a lightsaber too.
I know it's a big galaxy, but still, like, the Jedi are supposed to be gone, like,
Right.
and he's in the rebellion, like,
Yeah, and we see the Ghost on Yavin 4, so you'd assume that someone would have said, hey, look, this kid just came through, like, was escorted by Ben Kenobi. It's I'm sure Kanan would probably introduce himself to Luke.
yeah, or Ben, even. It's got to end. Like, I don't. You theoretically could continue the show, but Kanan's got to go soon, right?
Do you think? Yeah, I think so. Do you think Thrawn as a villain can survive past New Hope?
Yeah.
Okay, I kind of felt the same way too. I'm interested to see.
I don't see why not. In fact, you need somebody to fill Tarkin's role.
Well, I mean, Vader kind
Vader does. He does. But you also, I mean, he can't control the galaxy all by
everything. Yeah, it's a big empire.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I see no reason not to have Thrawn involved in the Empire up until his untimely death, which is who knows when in this series of,
Right.
Who knows how they end his story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, in theory, you could still have him come back like years down the road with a new wing of like the rebuilt empire. Like for all we know, he could even be part of the First Order.
For all we know, he's Snoke.
Oh no, Thrawn is Snoke.
I haven't seen that theory before. You may have heard it here first.
Yeah.
It could possibly be.
No, it's Snoke is going to be a brand new original character. I feel pretty convinced about that.
If he's not Mace Windu, he's a brand new character.
Right.
That's my money. He's either Mace Windu or a brand new character. Yeah, because Thrawn doesn't know anything at all about the Force. So
yeah, it doesn't make sense. Yeah,
no, it doesn't. So but I don't see any reason why he couldn't still be involved either.
Yeah, absolutely. So it'd be cool. It'd be interesting to see what that new series also what that explores. You know, do we get exploration of the time after Return of the Jedi, between Return of the Jedi and Force Awakens? Maybe that's what I feel is
That makes the most
likely.
sense. Yeah, that makes the most sense.
I mean,
They're big into filling in the gaps with these cartoons.
right? And like, what would you really fill in the gaps between A New Hope and Empire, and between Empire and Jedi? You know what? I think there's space for Empire and Jedi. To do some stuff, but I mean, who knows?
It depends on the group of characters that they choose to do, what story they choose to tell.
Yeah, and as long as you don't get too focused on our big characters, as long as like we don't have too many appearances by like, all right, well, here's Luke and Leia, they come in and our characters kind of look like average Joes who can't really do much, so they look kind of nerfed in comparison,
Well, yeah, or you could tell the further adventures of Luke and Leia in between those.
That's true.
movies.
That's
and that
true.
That could be really interesting. I mean, Mark Hamill's no stranger to voice acting, so that could work really well. And now that Carrie Fisher has passed on, it might be interesting to see more Leia stories.
Yeah, I'd watch it.
I would definitely be into it. The episode that they had her in, in this show, I thought was really good, a really good story. So, and ended up playing a huge role in the Battle of Scarif. Like that's where those hammerheads came from.
Right.
So I think it could be cool. I would love to see. I would like to see the time between Jedi and The Force Awakens. And see what Luke Skywalker is doing, kind of like how we saw Anakin and Obi-Wan in Clone Wars. I'd like to see that. I think that would be a really cool story to tell.
What do you think of a pre-Phantom Menace Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon?
Yeah, I'd be in.
Yeah. Nice. I like that.
I would totally be in. And you get to see, Mace Windu and Plo Koon and all those guys and the Jedi Council. I would totally be into it. I'd also be into a total Mandalorian story, told from. I'd like to see what Boba's been up to. Like we know a little bit of what Boba's been up to, bouncing around the galaxy with Bosk and some of the other bounty hunters. But I'd love I'd love to see a grown up Boba Fett story too. Like that would be fascinating. I'd love to see the story of Han and Chewie. I think like a comic cartoon version of that is perfect. Like that's a great way to tell that story.
I think it really lends itself. In many ways, I think it'd be. I'd be more excited to see that as a cartoon than as the young Han Solo live action movie.
Depends on what story they tell with the Han Solo action movie.
Yeah.
I hope it's not like, and this is how Han and Chewie met. Like I don't want to.
I guess it's going to be how Han and Lando met.
Right, and how he gets the. I'd like to have it end with how he got the Millennium Falcon, and then that's it.
I think you kind of it feels like you kind of have to, because I mean, Han without the Millennium Falcon, do you really want to see that?
Yeah, I do, but I want to see him get the Millennium Falcon.
Get it by the end of the movie.
Yeah, so that the movie ends with him flying off in the Millennium Falcon, either screwing Lando over somehow and running for his life, or Lando just sort of like shaking his head miserably that he lost to his friend Han, this great ship. So yeah. There's so many different directions that they can go, and I think that's sort of the cool thing about this is there are so many directions that they can go. Even in Rebels itself, there's a lot of directions they can go. Obviously, the Ghost was at Scarif, so it can lead us. We may get to see the battle from that perspective, which would be cool. I guess we kind of know how it turns out, but it would be kind of cool to see where they go from there. I'm more interested to see what happens after Scarif than I am to see the Battle of Scarif from the Ghost's crew. Right. I want they get away. Are they under siege? Are they trying to run interference and get Vader off their tail? What happens to Ezra and Kanan at that point? Is Kanan even still alive at that point? How is Maul gonna play into this? With his fixation to kill Anakin and Obi-Wan. It'll be interesting.
Well, especially since they both know about Luke and Obi-Wan at this point. That's going to be a really interesting part of this back half of this season. So
Yeah, and how do they mute that so that it's still a surprise who Luke Skywalker is to everybody else? Like,
right.
it doesn't, but like there's a lot of darkness ahead, and not in like I'm not sure what's happening, but like you look at it and you go, this can really only end badly, right?
Right. It feels that way.
Which I like. I really like that. I appreciate that in my storytelling. You know, like you are all like, I think the reason that you love Rogue One so much is because everybody dies.
Yeah.
That is like your
helps it.
fantasy. That's your fantasy for every movie. You're like, oh, it's a
It's like the end
Batman
of
movie.
glory, man. It's the end of glory. Glory is not poignant if
If everybody lives through it, right? Right.
Yeah.
You're absolutely 100% right in that story. Absolutely. But you translate that to every movie. You're like, oh, Batman? Yeah, he's got to die.
He's got to die.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, Gladiator and Braveheart. Those are great movies.
You love
Hero
that because they die.
dies.
Hero dies. You're pissed at Superman versus Batman because the end of Superman versus Batman, the ground wiggles a little bit, and you're like, ah, damn it, Superman's still alive.
No, I wish it was so bad. That death was totally unearned. That was just awful.
And the fact that he comes back from it makes
Yeah.
it even worse for you.
Let's not even get into Batman versus Superman. I don't want to
ruin this show.
ruin a Star Wars episode with talk about Batman versus Superman. Yeah, no, I know.
Those characters kinda have
It's a
to
very
die.
dark thing that I tend to like. I know. I'm not even going to pretend. But it's a very Disney thing, too. Let's be honest. Like, Disney is
Oh, they love to
no
kill their
stranger.
parents, yeah.
Oh, yeah. All the time. You know.
Yeah, so that being said, like I have high hopes. Like with the Batman thing, I was like, Addy, DC's never going to kill Batman.
And you were right.
And I was absolutely right. With Star Wars, I say Disney won't let any of these characters live. Like there's just no chance that the crew of the Ghost lives through all of this. At least most of them die.
Right. Well, I mean, it feels like Kanan is the only one that's got to die, I think.
Ezra's
you
gonna
can-
die too.
I think you can have Ezra walk away. I think the other thing is you
Oh,
can
an
also have the walk away.
Ahsoka? He's gonna do an Ahsoka. We're gonna have that. We're gonna do that.
Well, we
again?
don't know what happened to Ahsoka just yet.
She's dead.
You think so?
It hurts.
Yeah, I
me
mean,
to say so, but yeah.
I think so too. Just because, like, Vader walks away from the fight, not
Yeah.
killing
And-
killing his target. Like that seems a little weird.
That does seem
So-
really odd. Yeah.
Yeah, my guess is definitely that Ahsoka's dead. But yeah, that's still. I hate that.
hurts.
That we don't know.
It hurts.
It does.
I think we'll see her again.
Oh yeah, he said it. Like Filoni has said, we're gonna
yeah.
see her again.
But she's dead. Like,
Yeah,
her story's done for the most.
But he's also said that, like, and maybe he could just be messing with people and trying to throw them off the scent. But he said that she can't show up as a Force Ghost because she hasn't learned how
Right.
to become a Force Ghost.
Right.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So who knows? Like maybe we'll just get a flashback or a holocron thing or something like that.
Right.
I don't know, but I don't. You know, I think like for the most part, her story has been told.
Yeah.
And it's a great story. It ends the way it should be. You can't have her face Anakin and live.
Well, and you can't have her like I know there is a contingent of people like who's saying, oh man, you could have Ahsoka totally show up in the new trilogy somehow, and it just seems really,
Forced.
Yeah. For lack of a better pun.
Forced. Yeah. No, I don't think that's a great idea. I mean, I would. Part of me is like, yes, I would love to see Ahsoka
Because
on the
we
big
love
screen.
Ahsoka. And She's such a fun character. She's such a like as a character she's matured very well. And there are very few honestly as in all of Star Wars' mythos she's definitely like I'd easily put her as a top 10 character.
Ahsoka is Snoke. No.
Ahsoka. That's
Snoka. You ever notice that you've never seen Ahsoka and Maz Kanata
Snoke in
together?
this, oh right.
She's just in hiding. She cut off her ear things and just got big eyes because it hurt so bad. And then that's who she is. No. No, I still say her story is dumb. Like, it makes sense to end it there. It hurts, but it's a good hurt.
Yeah, I think it's the right ending, and especially with a series that's been so influenced by westerns, and like it seems like that's a very western, like a kind of thing you would do in a western. Either and that's which is why I think Ezra does have a chance to survive, because you could have Ezra walk off into the sunset type moment for him.
The only way Ezra survives is if he takes up like another religion of like and goes and joins Bendu or something like that, where he just completely is able to escape from the Jedi Sith paradigm.
Yeah, and I could see him wanting to break off that, that wanting to be a Jedi or Sith.
And becoming so disillusioned with the pull between Maul and Kanan that he walks away from it.
Yeah, or even the whole, maybe even the whole rebellion and the Empire too. I think there's room for that. Well, we'll see.
He'd have a lot of growing to do to walk away from the rebellion, because he's so emotional, so attached.
Well, I think that's an interesting thing about bringing in Saw Gerrera as well, to see the darker side of the rebellion.
Yeah.
So maybe that plays a factor in it, that disillusions him with the rebellion as well. But obviously never to a point where, like, he's obviously never going to join the Empire. That's not in Ezra's DNA. There's not his parents were killed by the Empire. You can't. You just can't push him that far. You can push him to the dark side, but you can't push him onto the side of the Empire.
No, but you could push. You could actually. You know what you could do? You could push him in as Maul's apprentice.
And that's exactly why I think you can push him into the dark side,
but not Yeah, I agreed, but not the Empire.
Right.
Yeah, no, I agree, and that would be interesting if that's how they ended Ezra's story, with his fall to the dark side. So there is, Kanan's dead. Ezra's Maul's apprentice. There is no more Jedi.
Or he even takes Maul's spot.
Oh yeah, maybe.
Because that's the other thing. Like, do you think like Maul can really survive into the original trilogy? Can he still be lurking in some corner of the galaxy?
I kind of like to think so.
I'd like to think so too, but
for the same reasons that I think Ahsoka has to die, I kind of feel like Maul has to live.
Really?
Yeah, because I feel like there needs to be something for Vader to keep his attention to, and having like sort of this, this other Sith out there.
Maul is like the comeback player of the year. Like,
he really is.
Not since Peyton Manning's spine surgeries or Adrian Peterson's like comeback from his ACL have we had a better comeback. I mean, who else comes from being cut in half?
Nobody.
To coming back to what?
Nobody. Yeah. He's that good. He is that good. I agree. He's the best. He's the best. He may be my favorite Sith.
Oh man, did you ever read the Son of Dathomir comics?
No, I need to get on that.
Yeah, they're not canon now, but I don't know. Actually, they kind of might in a backwards way, but it's definitely worth checking out because it continues some of the story from the Clone Wars show, and I'm looking forward to checking out the audiobook for Ahsoka, because there's some of that's in there too.
Oh, okay.
Some of Maul's story as well. As far because when we last left Maul in the Clone Wars story, he was in control of Mandalore, so it's kind of a big deal. Like, that's a big thing to just, he was in control of Mandalore, but Palpatine just broke him into submission.
Yeah,
yeah, and we just left him there. Like, that's a big hanging thread,
Yeah. Palpatine's such an ass. I love him too. He's great.
It's pretty amazing when he breaks him into submission. It's super dark. Super dark, but let us know what you think. What we can expect from Rebels in the next half of the season, throughout the rest of the series. How far this particular series can go. What can we expect? Like, what other sections of not the Marvel, but the Star Wars universe would you like to explore in animation with this style of TV series, like the Clone Wars and like Rebels? Is Ahsoka Snoke? Is it do we have a Snoke?
Snoke. That's the dumbest thing we've ever said, Addy.
But you love it, don't you? You want to get a Snoka trending.
Hashtag a Snoka.
Well, all of that you can check out on our website, certainpov.com, along with, don't forget to check out Patreon while you're there, see if you'd love to become a part of what we're doing. But please be sure to share this podcast with a fellow nerd, with a fellow Star Wars fan, someone who's also been watching Rebels, or get some other people to watch Rebels, because it is a great show. It is totally worth it if you love Star Wars lore, if you love the Star Wars universe, you just want more of it, you got to check out Rebels. I'm not sure why you listened to this episode and all the spoilers that we've had, but if you did, still, it's worth going back and watching those episodes. But again, all that information is on our website, certainpov.com, and until next week, stay scruffy, my nerf herders.
Thanks for listening to Certain Point of View. Don't miss an episode. Just subscribe, rate, and review the podcast on iTunes. Head over to certainpov.com.